Okay, welcome back, everyone. Just a quick reminder that we do have tight session times today, and we do welcome all of your questions, and please feel free to type them into the chat, and I will make sure that each of our presenters gets them afterward, because we probably won't have time to get to many of them, but we'll do as best as we can. And so with that, I'd like to turn things over to Remko Weijnen. He is going to talk to us about security for Citrix admins and consultants. And Remko, are you ready for me to send you over the screen?
Absolutely, Stephanie. There we go. So security for Citrix admins and consultants. I have a lot of slides, so I'll be going quite quickly. As Stephanie mentioned, please keep feeding your questions, and I'll try to answer afterwards as best as I can. Short introduction for those who don't know me. My name is Remko Weijnen. I am an ESG specialist for CloudHouse Technologies, and I am one of the Citrix CTPs, and I'm co-founder and steering group member for the Dutch Citrix user group. Also feel free to follow me on Twitter or follow up with questions there. If you don't know CloudHouse, I've put in a quick slide to talk about what we do. So we try to help you migrate away from legacy applications and move away to, say, the latest Windows 10 or the latest Citrix versions. And obviously in the context of security, this is very important to get away from Windows XP, old IE versions, etc. I always like to look at what's happening in the security field, and when I do a security presentation, I always like to pick up something that I saw on the same day. So fresh today is Apple. And what was revealed today is if you have an APFS container and you click the hide hint button, it actually shows you your real password. So I guess Apple, who is usually quite good on security, have something to do here. So the reason why I'm doing the security session is really something I found in this tweet by accident. And it says SysAdmins can be friends of security, but it was never a task for them. So most SysAdmins and consultants have never learned how to defend and protect against adversaries. So the reason why we're doing this session is to help you get aware, raise awareness for security, get you into the mind of a hacker, how do hackers think and operate, and try to give you some tips. One of the problems there is that malware is getting smarter on each incarnation. And a very good example is this picture that came from Microsoft. It describes the NotPetya malware that I'm sure all of you have heard of. And if we just scroll to a number of things, we can see this virus does something different if Kaspersky is found on the system. It dumps your credentials. It enumerates machines on your network. It uses tools like PSExec to move around on your network. And it has multi-threaded execution. Wow, I think most line of business applications aren't even multi-threaded today, but malware actually is, to make sure it infects all of your machines as quick as it can. So that's very interesting. So malware is getting smarter and smarter, and we see this on every new version that it gets more complicated and more complicated to fight. At the same time, exploits get easier. So I took this example, it's from Rubber Ducky. It's a USB key that we also demoed on Citrix Synergy. You can actually go to the website and select from a menu what you would like to add to this key. And once you insert it into a machine, it will do all these things. So for instance, disable your firewall, add an admin user, enable remote desktop. So you don't actually need to be a very sophisticated smart hacker. You can just go on the internet, order something, click from the menu what you would like, and off you go. At the same time, security isn't really a topic for users. And I want to show you a little video to highlight this. And I think it's quite amusing to see and to raise further awareness.
Dag Fien. Dus kun je doen. Voilà. school tegen Antwerpen.
Ja.
Insecten.
Dat blieft?
Ik voel 2 insecten op je rug. Kan dat?
Ja, vlinders.
Slovenie?
Zo, hè.
Een moto. Oranje.
Pas erop.
Zenit.
Oui, oui, bien.
Je hebt een vriendin. Julie de... Met wie?
Ja.
Een boeiend liefdesleven. 3, 4 zelfs.
Die vierde, daar zwijg ik meestal over, dus dat weten niet veel mensen.
Hoe is het met je spierscheur? Une maison rouge, balcon blanc. Ja. Ik zie geld, ik zie transacties. Maar kent je rekeningnummer van buiten? Ik denk dat ik het wel weet. Die staat wel negatief op je bankrekening.
Ja?
97. Last month you spent €200 on alcohol. Vorige maand €300 aan kleding gespendeerd. 8.
Ja.
5. Voor een huis dat van eigenaar gaat veranderen. €795.000.
Ja, maar eigenlijk.
41.
Ja.
Is dat juist?
Ja, dat is juist. Oh my god. Oh nee. Ah, dat is, ik weet niet hoe eng.
So awareness, security. So as I mentioned, users aren't really aware of this, and sometimes you can't really blame them. This is a screenshot that I took 2 weeks ago, and it was actually a rootkit pretending to be a component of Citrix NetScaler, and especially in the context of a security update that was upcoming and expected from Citrix. Can you actually blame a user for clicking on this and thinking, wow, that's great, I'm going to get an update to fix my security? And then obviously, people don't just do this with Citrix. This week, there was actually a banking Trojan, where a legitimate VMware signed binary was used to trigger the malware's payload. And we train our users to watch the certificate, see if it's green, and in this particular case, it's all valid, right? So we can't really blame our user. So the goal of this session is we're going to show you some examples. Hopefully it can be a bit of scary movie, but I'm hoping it won't be the scary It one. But awareness is the goal. So obviously, if you're talking about security, well, you really can't miss Equifax and what happened there. I'm not going into too much detail. As you all know, 143 million details were leaked, including social security numbers. And it's, there's nothing you can do about it. There is no way to give 143 million people a new social security number. But if we look at what happened, I made a little timeline. And my takeaway from this timeline is that it took Equifax almost 5 months to deploy the patch for Apache Struts. And this is, in my essence, the big problem. How do you keep up with all the security stuff going on? How do you know you should patch? How do you know you're vulnerable? And how do you deploy your patches in a timely manner? And this one was also very interesting. So this is the Cve Database. So any vulnerability found gets assigned a unique number. And they actually keep track of which particular system has the most vulnerabilities. So this is the top from 2016. And if you look at it, Android is on number 1. Recently, somebody said Android is the Wild West of security, which I thought was a quite funny remark. But obviously, it's a big problem. But interestingly, the first occurrence of Windows is on number 13. And the stuff before it is obviously the Adobe Reader and its Flash in there. But there's a lot of Linux in there. So kind of the perception that Linux is always secure and Windows isn't, might not be true today. Obviously, there's more detail behind this because you also need to look at, what's the impact of these particular vulnerabilities. But it's good, change of mindset, and it focuses on Microsoft's intention to make Windows a more secure platform. Then another thing we obviously need to mention is WannaCry, because this was big. Many people were hit. It was an SMB1 vulnerability. And one of the interesting quotes that I saw is the reason why it hit China and Russia most of all is that they are using unlicensed Windows versions, which means you don't get security updates. And especially in the context of bring your own, that I'm sure many of us are doing. Are you sure your users are updating? This one is also interesting. So if you look at Windows 10 configuration out of the box, many people's perception is that SMB1 is disabled. It actually isn't. So out of the box, it's enabled. Luckily, there is a single PowerShell command that we can kick off to disable it. But interestingly, in the Windows Insider preview, it was recently announced that it would be disabled out of the box, which again, I think is a very good move to make Windows more secure out of the box. Then when we go somewhere, we always do a security scan on the network. This is a scan at Citrix Synergy, which, mind you, was 3 to 4 months after WannaCry. And on the Citrix Synergy speaker network, where all the experts that teach you about Citrix and security are active, we immediately found one machine that didn't have the MS-17 patch against WannaCry. Then again, a couple of months later, I was at E2EVC conference in Prague. We did another scan on the hotel's public Wi-Fi, immediately found a machine that didn't have the patch. Then I managed to find a sample of the WannaCry virus. So I'd like to show this to you. So I have 2 virtual machines, and I have an important document called Hello World on both machines. And the WannaCry sample is disguised as the task scheduler component. As you can see, it starts to infect all the files on my machine, and it does so quite quickly. So as an encryption tool, it is very, very efficient. Now, obviously, I was expecting that it would infect the machine on the right. And whilst I was looking at this, we can see that it's doing some interesting things. It's deleting my shadow copies. It's preventing me from a boot repair. So it's setting recovery to disabled. And it's trying to make it as hard as possible for me to get back in the system to run recovery or antivirus tools. Now, as you can see, the machine on the right was actually still not infected. The reason why this is happening is because the implementers of WannaCry had released their code in a hurry, and it's essentially buggy. So the actual exploit that tries to infect other machines on the network, it doesn't work most of the time, which was a big luck of us for us all. And as I mentioned in a later incarnation, NotPetya, they actually fixed the EternalBlue exploit, that is the SMB1 exploit, and it was actually working. What I also found amazing is that a very smart guy in the security community, he wrote a tool which he called WannaCry. And WannaCry searches the memory of the machine for prime numbers. And using these prime numbers, there's about a 50% chance you can decrypt your files if you have been infected by WannaCry. So I tried to test this in my lab. Actually the 50% for me worked because the left machine, I was able to find the prime number and get the files decrypted. On the right, I wasn't able to. So on the left, you can see that it's searching for the prime number. And on the right, I'm going to start the decryption tool as well. So there we go. Our files are decrypted again, and we can actually read the text. So to summarize, EternalBlue was the exploit behind WannaCry. It's known as the MS-17 exploit. And the public release was done by a group called the Shadow Brokers. The Shadow Brokers actually try to sell you a subscription. And apparently going to a subscription model is very popular for software vendors today. And they're trying to get monthly income from selling you exploits. They released this particular one to show that they can actually do it. We saw that the exploit was actually broken, but luckily there is a working version available for us in Metasploit. So Metasploit is a tool used by both pen testers and security experts, but also used by black hat hackers. And it has a working version of the exploit that I would like to show you. So Metasploit can be launched from the console. The easiest way to get it is to download something called Kali Linux, which is a VM with all the tools in it. So you just start the console, you type MSF console, and if you only know that the exploit you're looking for is something with MS-17, you can actually use the search command and search for any exploit which has MS-17 in it. And as we can see, there is an exploit available. It's targeted for Windows, specifically for SMB, and it has the MS-17 EternalBlue signature in it. So there we go. We're going to use the exploit. Now we need to set some parameters to the exploit, which is the IP address of the machine that we want to attack, and the IP address of your own machine. In my case, these are all local addresses on the network. In a typical attacker scenario, one of the addresses would be the remote IP address of the hacker. So it's called the L host and the R host. L for local and R for remote. And then the only thing left to do is set the payload that we want to do. Metasploit comes out of the box with something called a reverse shell. As most firewalls block incoming traffic, the reverse shell makes sure that the client, the attacking machine, sets up a connection to my machine so that I can connect back in and give commands to the machine. Then we type the exploit command. And we are in the virtual machine. So many customers were hit by the WannaCry virus. One of them was Maersk, a very big company. You would have thought that they learned something for it. I accidentally found that they were looking for a security officer, and their site isn't even HTTPS, so there's a lot to do there. I will go through these a bit quickly because time is ticking on. But this was an interesting quote I saw as well. Patching is the same like dieting. We know we sort of have to do it, but we don't always do it. For talking back security in the context of Citrix, then obviously, as many people are aware, there was recently a build from Netscaler that was pulled offline. And later on, Citrix produced a fix where if you had a misconfiguration, it will be possible for a hacker to connect on your management interface. So the obvious questions to all of you is, did you apply this patch? And even more interesting is, now that we have Citrix Cloud, is the patch applicable to Citrix Cloud, and did Citrix patch it? So I looked at the Citrix Cloud status, and the patch was released on September 25th. So I was expecting that there would be maintenance activity on September 25th. There wasn't. then I looked back, and a couple of days earlier there was maintenance, so I figured, maybe Citrix was able to deploy the patch previously. So I clicked on the details, and apparently there was a connection issue, and there was another connection issue before, but there is no indication of the patch being deployed. Now again, maybe the patch isn't applicable to Citrix Cloud. Therefore, communication is very important, right? You should indicate if the patch is applicable or not. And this is again another example of an exploit coming out. This particular one was for Microsoft Word, coming out in November 2016. First reports in the wild were April 2017. Then for Microsoft to come out with the fix was April 2017. And then people still need to go out and patch it. So this time between, which is easily 5, 6, 7 months, let's say you are capable of deploying the patch very rapidly, makes the attack window large. This is another interesting one, and I'm sure that many of you are using HPE servers, and I found that there is a patch for integrated lights out, which essentially means that an unauthenticated remote attacker can take control of your physical machine, go to the console, to power operations. So again, my question to you would be, are you aware of this particular vulnerability? Did you patch it? And did you scan the rest of your environment for similar patches? So the reason why I'm hammering on this is I think it is simply impossible for a human to follow all of this and keep track of it. So we need proper tooling to assist us. This is a particular tool that I'm using as an example, but it can scan, for instance, the golden image that you are feeding to MCS or PVS. And it not only scans it for your operating system patches, but also for 55,000 different applications. So it gives you an immediate dashboard overview on patches that you might be missing. I've put a couple of tools that I like on this sheet, so you can look back later and see what they are like. But the tools that we use today are your traditional antivirus tools. Everybody knows McAfee, and this one is kind of funny because the guy in the middle is John McAfee. Are you trusting him with your systems? And some companies even publish what kind of antivirus they're using. So this particular case, you can see in the user instructions that they're using McAfee internal. But you might be using other tools. My co-presenter Geert, who I do this presentation sometimes with, calls it your dad's AV. And he makes this comparison. He says, this used to be okay years ago, and antivirus is the same. So we need different kinds of tools. We need new tools that use new approaches to help you battle malware and viruses. And again, I've just listed a couple of tools available. And I've listed an example where it not only says, is this malware or not, but also what is it doing, what process is it working with, where is it connecting to give you more information to decide on. Obviously, Citrix is playing in this field as well. So as you are aware, at the last Synergy, they've released the hypervisor introspection together with Bitdefender. And one of the things that they mentioned is that this would protect you against attacks like WannaCry. So obviously, as a security guy, I wanted to see, does this really work? So I've deployed it in my lab. And again, I'm using the Metasploit tool. And I'm going to attack a VM and see if we can actually get this exploit working. So instead of the earlier success that we saw, we now have a fail. But obviously, you just don't want to only stop the attack. You also want to know that it happened. So I looked into the reporting capabilities, and I could see that there was an incident reported. And if we look into the details, we can actually see that a process tried to inject something, in this case to the print spooler. So this actually works quite well. Again, there are other tools around, but I think these are very good complementary solutions to antivirus. Very interesting is that even though the hypervisor introspection does not have an agent in the VM, nor does it use CentOOls, it is still process aware. So you can set different policies for different types of applications. So you could make different policies, say, for your browser than for other applications. And you can also set mitigations when something happened, for instance, launch a scam. So quite a nice tool. I'm hoping there will be support for other hypervisors as well, which I'm sure we'll hear more about in the future. So if we look at the recap, which I'm going through quickly, the exploit was released in a hurry. Later incarnations had actually a working exploit, and regular antivirus just doesn't work against this particular exploit. What you should do, obviously, is install the patch. You could look at implementing Windows Defender Credential Guard and use next-gen AV solutions. So another thing I wanted to look at is the remote desktop client. The reason why is it's the second most published application on Citrix XenApp. The reason is, I think, quite clear, because all of us use the remote desktop client to do things like remote administration. So an attack I looked at is RDP man in the middle. So using something called ARP spoofing, which again can be used with tools out of the box. We can trick a network switch that a particular machine is now on a different location and redirect traffic towards it. So in this particular instance, I'm going to connect with RDP to a jump box. And from the jump box, I'm going to connect to Active Directory. And I'm going to reset a user's password. I'm running a little bit out of time, so I'm going to fast forward the video a little bit. But what happens is I was doing a man in the middle. And first thing is I can immediately extract the user's password credentials. Secondly, I have recorded, or actually I'm able to replay the whole session. And whilst the session is replaying, I can see the keystrokes in the bottom corner. This means that I have keystrokes and what's happening on the screen nicely in sync, and it's very easy for me to capture credentials. So if I zoom this in a little bit, you can see in the keystrokes that my very complicated password to enter the machine, and even the credentials that I entered in the user account control dialog. So again, this is very simple, and a couple of things to do is don't use untrusted self-signed certificate, which RDP comes with out of the box. Use network level authentication, and never ever use connect and don't warn me. And I'm sure we all know this, but I see plenty of people still doing this. And you know, in my last presentation in London, we did a little scan on the public Wi-Fi, and we immediately found people not using network level authentication on the public Wi-Fi. So it's very easy to attack these people with an RDP man in the middle. Most importantly, if you see a dialog, look what it's actually saying. You know, and if it's saying I cannot verify the identity of the remote computer, make sure you don't click it or check what's going on. And the only way to do this is if you're using proper certificates. In the first slide, I had a link to the knowledge base article explaining how you can use your own certificate server to assign proper certificates for remote desktop. Then again, even if you do, there's ways around it. So in this demonstration, I did a scan on the local network. And I'm scanning for open SMB machines with port 445. And I'm running a script to see which of those machines are vulnerable for the SMB 17 patch. Again, this is scripting out of the box in Kali Linux. And I found a machine that didn't have the MS17 patch. So I decided to attack it again. And immediately when I attack the machine, I can start launching commands. And in this machine, I am on the domain. I have been given system privileges, so the highest I could possibly get. And a built-in tool in Metasploit is Mimikatz. And Mimikatz is a tool that, for example, can capture the user's credentials. So by loading the Mimikatz extension and typing the Kerberos commands, I can immediately list the clear text password credentials of any user logged onto the box and any network share that the user is connected to. I think that was my timer that I'm running out. I had some more context that I wanted to show you. So I will end with the last thing. If we want to do a man in the middle, we can actually use Metasploit to forward the incoming RDP connections to the attacker's machine. And we can actually export the RDP used certificates so that you will not get a security pop-up. This makes it very easy to do an RDP man in the middle without you knowing. And the attacker is listening in, captures anything you do on the screen, anything you type, and tries to move in your network with these credentials. This brings me to the end of my time, so I will give back to you, Stephanie. And I had some more demos, which I hopefully can show you on the next occasion.
We would love it. We would love to have you back. I hope I can talk you into doing another user share sometime at CEGC. Thank you so much, Remko. We are going to take another short break. And again, I'm going to have all these resources for all of you. After this is over, we'll be sending out links to recordings, slide decks, and any questions we grab, I'll make sure to pass on and get answers for you. And we'll share the links for all of those answers. So we are going to take another quick break, but before that, I want to just let you know we have Darian Gibson and Patrick Cobble coming up, and I'm excited to have them. So we'll be back in just a few minutes at about 2:20.